We have a panel of people here, and we're going to let Stephen go first because he has a balanced perspective. Because, of course, mine is unbalanced, because it must be if you're going to advocate on behalf of women and girls and children and members of the LGBT community. I'm here actually not because I hate street harassment, which I do, but actually because of street harassment. 50 years ago, my grandmother was living in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, and she put my grandfather on an airplane. And at that time, it was a dictatorship, and one of the dictator's henchmen, they were called Totomakuts, came up behind her, caressed her hair, started to harass her, and she turned around and told him what he could do with himself and was thrown into prison. And she spent the night there before she could get out, and they decided that week to leave. I'm going to tell you, I know you all have street harassment experiences. I'm going to quickly tell you some of mine because they're really salient to what I want to talk about online. I was 9 the first time I was threatened with rape overtly with those words. I was 15 the first time I punched a man in the throat for grabbing me so he could get a good look at me. I was 22 the first time I remember being groped in a subway. I was 32 the first time a police officer pulled me over by the side of the road so that he could show me how to put my 3 babies' seat belts on properly, because I didn't know how to do that. I was wearing a bathing suit. And he made me get out and do that with the back seats. I was 42 the year that a police officer followed me around as I was walking for exercise, and I tried to avoid him, and he managed to find me and park his motorcycle right in front of me and proceed to talk to me. So in between all of that were countless other forms of harassment. And I managed to do what we all do, which is live with it, until the day my 13-year-old, who was 3 inches taller than I am now, said she wanted to go get some ice cream by herself. And I walked into the bathroom at my house and I burst out crying. Because I thought, you know, I don't want her to fold in on herself. And I closed a business that I had, and I said to my husband, I'm making this financially irrational choice on behalf of our family to write about these issues, because it's all I can do. And he said, go for it, right? And so that's what I started doing. And of course, what I did to avoid street harassment and to fight that violence that I know we all live with. And I should say I was a feminist in college, and decided after college that I would just be a feminist person in space. And that would be good, because that's how feminism will work these days. And so I got online where, of course, people could send me rape and death threats. Because why not, right? And I started writing about that, and I know there are many people in this room who have experienced this. And a funny thing happened when I started to write about it. From the quiet of my office, I work alone, and so I value this online community. But what happened is way too many women started asking me for help because there was no place for them to go. There's no legal structure that supports the pain that they're in, the violence. And so they started sending me things. Rape videos, actual rape videos that were posted on Facebook. They sent very graphic imagery of domestic abuse and violence that they were triggering to them. And I thought, this is astounding that there's nowhere for them to turn, because there is really actually no mechanism to deal with that. The police will literally say, what is Twitter? You don't even know where to begin with this question, right? So I chose Facebook very carefully, actually, because Facebook had the most detailed process and procedures for how to deal with moderating content. And this is interesting, because the harassment going on online is really just an amplified mirror of the harassment that we all live with. And they had set a system up whereby they were regulating content and thereby regulating expression of speech the way we are regulated in real space. Everybody thinks feminists want to suppress speech. This is one of the funniest things I have ever heard in my life, okay? So the structure of their reporting, everything about what they did made it impossible for a woman reporting violence or harm or threats to be able to communicate the effect of those things when they especially happen en masse. One case in particular was a woman who's very brave. Her name is Trista Hendren. She said something called Rape Book, so that people could send the rape jokes and the imagery to her and that everybody could report it. And her picture was put on rape memes. Her address was shared in a forum. She started getting phone calls at home. She reported this. She worked with Facebook. Some things came down and some things didn't. And then it became crystal clear to me because she left the space. It was too hostile. And so it became a more friendly space for abusers and rapists in the name of some kind of shallow, distorted ideal of free speech. So I called Facebook, and as a writer/activist, this was an odd thing for them because they didn't know who they were talking to. The writer, who's supposed to be neutral, which is a laugh to, and the activist, who might do something unpredictable, right? So I said, can you tell me, please, about several words that are in our laws? They're very important because these companies are simply looking at precedent in the law and then applying it internally. The word safe. Who defines what's safe? The word threat. The word imminent harm. And I tried to explain, based on all of these experiences that I had had, the women I knew had had, that other marginalized people were having, that we don't live with imminent threat. That's that nice idea that two men in an alley in the 19th century might shoot each other. We live with pervasive threat that we avoid all the time. And so when we interact online, we're trying to avoid those same things. And so I suggested that when a woman whose private information has been shared, who's receiving up to 500 hostile misogynistic messages a day, says that she feels threatened, that's legitimate. And that when someone sends you a cannibalistic porn video with your face on it, they might get anxious. And that didn't seem to fly. So I wrote a letter to Sheryl Sandberg, because why not, right? And said, these are 4 things that Facebook needs to do. And she responded, and she handed it off to her her VP of Global Policy, but then nothing happened. And we initiated a social media campaign called the Facebook Rape Campaign that was really global. I did it with Laura Bates in England and Jacqueline Friedman here, who's head of Women Action in Media. Laura founded Everyday Sexism. And we confronted them to recognize gender-based hate. We don't have recognition of gender-based hate virtually anywhere. And the language that we use is so pervasively misogynistic, which we saw this weekend, right? We saw this in action with the murder that took place in California. And it's because our laws don't recognize these harms. And so when we see it online, it's not that we can regulate it offline, because it has this dynamic relationship with the laws that we have in real space. There's no distinction, right? What we experience online is real life. And so I want to end on a high note, though, because I didn't have a presentation because, honestly, it's some of the most, what I would present to you is really graphically violent, and I was very depressed after this weekend and didn't want to do that to anybody else. But 2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak about these issues, and I was in a room where I was indeed introduced as a possibly unbalanced person by imputation, right? And I said these things, and the questions that came back to me were, well, what can this government do? I was in an embassy. What can this government do? And I said, well, you need to look to your own laws. You need to look at your own policing. You need to look at your own culture, because these interactions are mirrors of those things. And then I talked about online harassment with some detail. And the most senior person in the room was the president of the Italian legislature, who is a woman who has experienced online harassment. And that had never happened to me before, because I knew that she knew what I was talking about, and that I was there because it was important to her. And she had the ability to affect policy, which is really what we need. And I think that's good news.